Hi, I recently posted a review of a locally manufactured extension lead, the Panther, and I had a couple of people ask me, how about CDRKING extension leads like this one? It's branded Stark, which is of course just another brand that CDRKING use for their generic products. So this is the one that we're going to be looking at. I went to the store and this is the only one that they had in stock. I have tested CDRKING extension leads before, but I haven't posted a video. When I bought one before, it was absolutely awful. It was the white one that has the universal sockets. I can't remember, I think it was 8 sockets in a small square like this. The plastic was so thin and weak. If you went like this, it felt awful. When I opened it up, the wires were so thin that there's no way you'd want to use it for any kind of serious current. Now, this one says up to 800 watts, and then on the back it says up to 10 amp. So which is it, 800 watts or 10 amp? Because 10 amp at 220 volts, or give or take, is a lot more than 800 watts. It's over 2000 watts. So I don't really understand what they mean by do not overload the power strip, 10 amps maximum, but then elsewhere it says 800 watts. So which one is it? Anyway, it's 60 peso. I know some of you will be saying, well, what do you expect for 60 peso? You're not going to get a great product. Well, you at least want a product that works. So let's open this up and see if it works and see how safe it is. So here's the extension lead. It has 6 outputs. It says it's rated up to 800 watts, although on the back it says up to 10 amps and do not overload power strip, 10 amps maximum. Of course, 10 amps at 220 volts is a lot more than 800 watts. It's over 2000 watts. Of course, the voltage fluctuates a little bit, so you can't be exact, but it's way more than 800 watts. So I'm not really sure what that's about. Anyway, let's take it out of its wrapper. I'm not expecting great things from this, but we'll see. So one thing that you notice is that the plastic has these weird marks on it, almost like it's been under strain or something. To be honest, it does feel stronger than the CDRKING one that I bought before, but it's still not great. I mean, you can feel it kind of opening apart a little bit when you go like this, and it's obviously cheap plastic, but it seems good enough, and the screws are recessed, so that's a bit of a safety feature there. If we look at the plug, we can see it does have a ground pin, and let's just test if that actually matches up. So let's see, let's use our tester in the ground. So that's good, at least it is wired up. Now this is where I expect things to get a little bit bad when we open this up. Now they describe this as a mini breaker switch on the packaging, so let's open this up. So let's start with the wire that comes in here. The strain relief on this thing isn't great. You can see that this basically clamps on here, but not very well, and I'm pretty sure if you gave that a tug, it's pretty much just going to rip these wires straight out, so that's not a great start. Now let's look at these wires. Oh my goodness. Look at this. So this is the ground wire. I'll just remove it from here. Now look at how that's connected. Let me zoom in. Look at that. The wire is all frayed, and I don't know how it's even held on there. I'm not even sure how they've joined this. It must be the smallest piece of solder ever just under there, because most of the wire is completely exposed and frayed, and oh goodness, and this here, it has to be the flimsiest piece of metal that you could possibly find. I mean, look at this. Look at that, no effort at all. Wow, that's ridiculous. So let's have a look at how they've connected the wires to the breaker switch. It looks like they've also soldered them, but again, I don't know if you can really call it solder, because I can't even see any solder. That's how little they've used. It's almost like they've done some kind of spot welding. because I can't see any solder on there. That is just awful. So let's look at the other rails. You can see that these are what's meant to grab your pins. It's obviously not going to provide a great connection. You know, you're probably going to get loose pins in there and a loose ground here. And again, yeah, it's just awful. And this is the weakest metal ever. It's a little bit stronger than the ground at least, but it's still pretty poor. There's not really much else to it, to be honest. We just have the ground and, you know, our two conductors, live and neutral, and our little breaker switch here. And I don't know how good the breaker switch is. They call it a breaker switch, but so let's actually put some power through this thing and see how it stands up. I'm going to put everything back exactly how it was. Okay, it's now ready for some testing. Before I plug anything into the extension lead, I'm going to measure our test load, which is this hairdryer. So it's got 2 settings and we'll see how many watts it consumes on each setting. So this is the first setting. So we can see that on setting 1 it consumes around 425 watts. Let's try setting 2. So we saw that on setting 2 it consumes around 810 watts. And now I'm going to turn it on to the first setting, which is around 425 watts, and I'll just leave it for a short while. And I'll test if it feels warm. Well, surprisingly, the wire doesn't feel warm. And considering how small the wires were, I expected to feel a little bit of warmth. Now we're going to try the second power setting, which was around 808 watts or 810 watts. Surprisingly, the cable still doesn't feel any warmer. It seems to have managed 800 watts and yeah, doesn't feel warm. I'm actually really surprised by that because the cables they're using are so thin. But what I'm not sure about is whether it's just this outer insulation that's preventing me from feeling the heat. So now we're going to test the water heater and the hairdryer at full speed, which will be around 1450 watts. Now this CDRKING extension lead says that it's rated for 800 watts, no more than 10 amps. So it's still within 10 amps because 10 amps at 220 volts would be around 2200. We're only at 1450, so let's see what happens. So the wire is pretty hot, but amazingly it did stand up to it. I can feel the wires are very warm and the plastic is very soft. But amazingly, 1500 watts, it actually managed. I'm very surprised. Yeah, very surprised. I don't think I really want to push it any further than that. Yeah, I mean, if I smell the rubber, it really smells like burning. So I opened it up again to see if there was any damage, and pretty much everything looked fine. The wires came off really easily. Unfortunately, I lost some footage, so I'm having to reshoot this, but the wires came off very easily. They seem to be, I think it's some kind of spot weld, but so the wires actually broke a lot easier at the switch than these spot welds that they appear to have done here. I can't show you now because I've lost the footage, but basically they were like that. I just gave it a tug and they all disconnected. So you can imagine that if this was plugged in and then somebody tripped on this wire, it would just pull out so easily. And then, you know, if these touch you, you're going to get a big shock. So yeah, it was like that. I just gave it a tug and it came straight out, so that's ridiculously dangerous. These are the rails, of course, so when you plug in your pins, they just hold tight onto the pin, or not so tight in some of the cases. Some of them are tighter, depends on the pin. So again, depending on what you're plugging in, some things might actually be loose, so that's not great. Let's look at the thickness of the wires. I'll just cut a fresh sample just to show. So here you go. There's some kind of chalk substance between the wires. Strip them all. You can see we're not losing any strands here. This is the thickness of the wires. This is what they expect to carry, either 800 watts or up to 10 amp, depending on which specification you believe on the box. Those thin wires there. In comparison, this is the flat flex cable from the Panther extension lead. If we put them side by side, you can see the Panther wire is much thicker than these puny little wires. I still can't believe that they even managed up to 1500 watts. It's just insane. Okay, they did get very hot and the plastic started to get soft, but amazingly they carried it. So there you go, that's the Stark or CDRKING extension lead. I don't know what to say. Obviously I'm not going to recommend this because the wires are just ridiculously thin. There's no protection against the wire being pulled out. It came out so easily that if you tripped on this, it's instantly going to rip out and probably shock you. The bars inside are just completely rubbish, basically. I'm just still amazed, to be honest, that it actually managed to carry 1500 watts over these tiny little wires. It's insane. Of course they did get very hot and the rubber or plastic started to get very soft, so I'm sure if you left it running long enough it's going to probably melt, maybe short circuit, maybe even catch on fire. But to be honest, you're probably not going to run that kind of current through it. Either way, it's cheap, but it's a piece of junk. Wouldn't recommend it. It's not worth the risk. So thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please give a thumbs up and subscribe.